Okay, we're holding now at the top of Mem Vav Amud Aleph. We said in the Mishnah that regarding the rules of chametz, if you have the Mishnah in the Mem Hamad base, if you have a piece of dough stuck into a pot, then it depends. We gave different dinim on if the dough is chametz or the dough. If you have to get rid of the dough, you don't have to get rid of the dough. So we said the same rules regarding dough is the same rules regarding tumah. That regarding tumah, if you have a piece of dough stuck onto the pot, so dough is food and therefore it's makabel tumah. But if it's part of the pot, then it's not makabel tumah. So we said the same rules that apply to Pesach apply to tumah also. So the Gemara asked, how can you say it's the same rules regarding Pesach? The rules are that if it's a kazayis, then you have to get rid of it, and if it's less than a kazayis, you don't have to get rid of it. That's the rules regarding Pesach. That it's all dependent on how big it is. But regarding tumah, it doesn't depend on how big it is. Regarding tumah, it depends if you care about it or you don't care about it. Because regarding tumah, if you care about the dough, you don't want the dough to be there. So then the dough is makabel tumah. Why? Because you can't say it's part of the pot, because I don't want the dough to be there. But if I don't want the dough to be there, so it's the dough is bottle. Once it's bottle, it becomes part of the pot. It loses its status of as food, and therefore it's not makabel tumah. So how can the Mishnah say that they have the same din and they don't have the same din? One case is dependent on size, and one case is dependent on intention. So we're going to start all the way at the bottom here. Base Elam Rabbi Hachikam. This is what the Mishnah used to say. Top of Vav Medalef now. The Inyan Tziruf Tumum BePesach, that dough on Pesach has the same dinim regarding chametz and the dinim regarding tumah. But on the rest of the year, there's a difference between tumah and Pesach. So regarding Pesach, we're going to explain the case in a second. Regarding Pesach, there's no difference between the dinim of chametz and the dinim of tumah. What does that mean? What does that mean? I have a piece of food less than a kabetza. Right, the shear for something to be makabel tumah, for food to be makabel tumah, has to be a kabetza. So I have food less than a kabetza. Let's say apple. Let's say apple. Let's say apple. I have an apple less than a kabetza. The nagu bahai botzik, and I have a piece of dough on my pot, and the apple is touching the piece of dough. The apple is less than a kabetza. I have a small piece of dough on the side of the pot, stuck into the pot, and my apple is touching the piece of dough. Then a Talmudic person came and he touched the foods together. He touched the apple and the piece of dough. So the question is, do we say that the piece of chametz is mitzaref to the apple and therefore the apple will now become tummy? Do we say the piece of dough makes the shir kabetza and therefore now the apple becomes tummy? Or do we say no, that the piece of dough isn't food, the piece of dough is connected to the pot? So it's not makabel tumah, it's not makabel tumah for food. And therefore, it's not mitzaref to the apple. Once it's not mitzaref to the apple doesn't have a shear of a kabetza, and therefore the apple isn't makabel tumah. So the answer is, if it's mitzaref or not, it depends when it is. If it's bepesach, the isurei chashuv, if it's on Pesach, meaning I have a piece of dough on the pot on Pesach, and the apple's touching the dough on Pesach. So since dough is also on Pesach, so we say isurei chashuv. The Isser makes it chashuv. The Isser of Pesach makes it significantly recognizable, because I would have to get rid of it during the year, and I would have to get rid of it, and therefore, since regarding Pesach it's Asr, so too it's only food is Asr. So if regarding Pesach I say it's food, so regarding Tumah it's also food, and therefore if it's touching my apple, it's able to mitzaref to be mashing the shir of kabetza, and everything will be tummy. But b'shayim Shana, regarding the other days of the year, if it's on a regular Wednesday, the kbeida tali milsa. So then I can't say that the isser makes a chashuv to count it as food, because it's not asr. So what does it depend on? How do we see if my piece of dough during the year is counted as food or not food? Depends if I care about it or not. If you care about it, meaning you don't want the dough to be there, so the dough is food, mitzaref. So then, since the dough is food, it's able to mitzaref to other substances, other foods, because it's also food, and therefore they're able to matam it together. But if you want the food to stay in the pot, you want the dough to stay in the pot and become part of the pot, so then it becomes part of the pot, and becomes part of the pot, then it's not food. And during the year, it won't be mitzayef to food. It won't be mitzayef to food to make it tum. So we explained over here is that there's the big difference between dough on the pot on Pesach and dough on the pot the rest of the year. Dough on the pot on Pesach, even if you want to remove the dough from the pot, or you want the dough to be in the pot, it doesn't make a difference what you think, because since it's aser, so it's counted as food, and once it's counted as food, then it's makabel tumah. But during the year that it's not aser, so then it depends on your intention. If you want it to be food, meaning you want to take it off the pot eventually, so then it's makabel tumah. If you don't want it to take it off the pot, you want it to stay there, so it becomes part of the pot. Once it becomes part of the pot, it's not makabel tumah, just like the pot is not makabel tumah. That's how we're translating the Mishnah. The Mishnah is saying just like the dinim of Pesach applied to tumah also. That's only speaking on Pesach itself. Ask the Gemara, I'm asking for Rav. Rav asks on this answer, Miktani mitzarif, did we say that they have a similar rule to be mitzarif? Who said the Mishnah is talking about the dinim of the dough being mitzarif to Isser? The dough being mitzarif to other foods to make it tumah. It doesn't say mitzarif. It doesn't say in the Mishnah that they have the same rules regarding tziruf, regarding the conjoining. It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. It says they have the same rules. He said the same rules regarding chatzitza. We're going to explain the meaning in a second, not regarding joining. So how can you say the Mishnah is talking about that they share rules, Pesach and Tumah, regarding joining the piece of dough joining other foods? It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. Elam Rabbi, so Rabbi has his own answer. He wants to say that the Mishnah means to say that they share rules, they share the same halachas. And so they share the same halachas regarding making the pot tar. What does that mean? Boil it, and you want to take it. What does that mean? It means like this. Your pot becomes tummy. Let's say your pot becomes tummy. Someone who's tummy touched your pot. What do you have to do to the pot to make it tar? You have to dip it into the mikveh. You want to dip it into the mikveh to make it tar. So it depends. But Pesach, if it's on Pesach, if it became tummy, you want to dip it into mikveh on Pesach. These sort of chashuv, and on Pesach, chametz is chashuv, meaning chametz is aser, and therefore, if there's a piece of dough on the side of the pot, and the piece of dough is aser, so when you're gonna dip your pot into the mikveh, so then the piece of dough would be chaitzis between the water and the pot won't be tar, because on Pesach the piece of dough is aser. Once a piece of dough is aser, becomes chashuv, meaning it becomes an entity. Once it becomes an entity, I can't say it's part of the pot, because if it's part of the pot, why is it aser for Pesach? So that's what the Mishnah is telling you, that if it's aser for Pesach, if it's the shir that's aser for Pesach, so it's there. So to regarding taro, regarding making the pot tar, it's also going to be chaitzet. It's also going to make a separation between the water and the pot. But your tefillah didn't help. But if I have a pot with dough stuck in it on a regular Wednesday, so then so then it depends what your intention is. If you're makbid, meaning if you do not want the piece of dough to be stuck to the pot, so then chaitzet. Then the piece of dough is a separate entity than the pot, and then the water, the piece of dough would be separating between the water, the mikveh, and the pot. But if you want the piece of dough to stay there, to stay on the side of the pot, it becomes part of the pot because you want it to stay there. So it's bottle. Once it's bottle, it has the same halachic status as part of the pot. If you dip it into the mikveh, then the pot will be tar. So they share. So regarding during the year, they have different dinim. Chametz, a piece of dough has a different din during the year than on Pesach. During the year, it's only chaitzet if you have intention for it to take it off the pot. Regarding Pesach, even if you have intention for it to stay on the pot, it's still chaitzet. Why? Because since it's also for Pesach, so it's also a separate entity regarding tar. Ask the Gemara, Maskif law, the Papa asked on this answer. Miktani v'chein Tara, does it say in the Mishnah that regarding dinim of Tara they have the same halachas? It doesn't say that in the Mishnah. Halin Tumaktani. It says regarding becoming tummy they have the same halachas. We just gave an answer how regarding Tara, to make something tar, to make the pot tar. So Pesach and Tumah will have the same dinim. But it doesn't say it on the Mishnah. It says regarding Tumah, they have the same din. So we're gonna have to find the case of Tumah that Pesach and the rest of the year have the same din. The Pesach, the piece of dough on chametz regarding chametz would affect the din of Tumah also. So Papa answers. He gives a new case. Tumah la reva, to make a pot tummy. What does it mean to make a pot tummy? It means like this. If you have a piece of dough stuck to a pot, and a sheretz, a rodent, touched that piece of dough. Okay, so while it's stuck to the pot, a rodent touched that piece of dough. So it depends when the rodent touched the piece of dough. In other words, do we say that only the piece of dough is asur because it's food, but the rest of the pot is mutter? Or do we say that the piece of dough, since it's part of the pot, so just like the piece of dough is tummy, so just like if it's part of the pot, then the piece of dough is makabel tumah, and therefore the pot will also be tied. It depends when the rodent touched a piece of dough. If it's Pesach, if the rodent touched the piece of dough on Pesach, so the surah chashuv, that since it's asur, so therefore it's a separate entity. And once halachically it has a separate entity, it is counted as a chatzitza, meaning it's a separate entity, and therefore it makes a separation between the rodent and the pot. And therefore the tumah doesn't go onto the pot because there's a separation between the rodent and the pot, which is a piece of dough. But the shayim es hashana, for the rest of the year, the kpeidah tal, if it's not a Pesach, so then we're gonna have to see if you care about the piece of dough, you don't care about a piece of dough. Meaning impact with Allah, if you care that the piece of dough should be taken away from the pot, so then chaytzitz. So then I could say the piece of dough is a separate entity because I don't want it to be there, and therefore if the rodent touches the piece of dough, it doesn't mean time of the pot because the separation between the rodent and the pot. But if you want the piece of dough to stick to the side of the pot, so then it becomes part of the pot. And if the rodent touches the piece of dough, it's as if it's touching the pot. If it's touching the pot becomes tummy. And that's Maskar in the Gemara. That the Mishnah is saying that just like for Pesach, we see that the piece of dough is asur. So too regarding Tumah, on Pesach, it would make it Tumah also. As opposed to the rest of the year where there's no Isur Chametz, so then it depends on your attention. If you want it to be there, you don't want it to be there. Going on to the next Mishnah, Mimvav Amid Aleph. Says the Mishnah, a whole new subject. But if you have a piece of dough that's like a chedesh, a piece of dough that's deaf. What does it mean he's deaf? It means that you have a piece of dough, we don't know if it's chametz or not. Okay? There's a reason to be cheshish that it's chametz, but we don't know. He hasn't seen it rising. He didn't see it rise a significant amount, but we don't know, meaning no one was guarding this piece of dough from becoming chametz. So can I eat it on Pesach or not? So answers the Gemara, Im yesh, it says the Mishnah, Im yesh kayetze bei she'achmitz, if you have other pieces of dough that were made in that time, the same time as this piece of dough, and they became chametz, it's asur. Yeah, let's say you made a whole batch of dough in 1 hour. So all the dough that was made in that hour, if some of it rose, so then this piece of dough is also in the process of rising, and therefore it's also asur. Says the Gemara, what if you do not have any other pieces of dough with it, or you do not have no other piece of dough started rising? Mao, what's the din? What is the status of this piece of dough that we have a safika? Answer the Gemara, I'm gonna Lakish, and then Lakish. The shear is the shear of something to become chametz takes from the time it walks, the time a person takes to walk from Migdal Nunya to Tverya. How much is from Migdal Nunya to Tverya? It's a mil. So the shear of something to become chametz is a mil. That's why we cook the matzah in under 18 minutes, because we want to make everything under a certain shear, and that's the shear that it becomes tamei nuts. So if you have a piece of dough, we didn't see it rise, but we know exactly when we started making the dough. So if it's less than a shear mil, then the dough is not chametz. Says the Gemara, why did he find such a funny shear? He said the shear of Migdal, to walk from Migdal Nunya to Tverya, and that is a shear mil. Why is it? Why? Says, I asked the Gemara, name a mil. The Gemara should just say a mil. The shear of dough becoming chametz is a mil. Why did he say the share of Dov Muhammad is the time it takes to walk from Migdal Nunya to Tveria? Answers the Gemara, he's teaching us the shiura the mill can make the nunya vatveri is to teach us that how big is the sheer mill, the sheer it takes to walk from Migdal Nunya to Tveria. And that's how we know now there's how big a mill is. The time it takes to walk from Migdal Nunya to Tveria, I think it's around 15 or 16-minute walk. Amar Rabbi said, Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish, in the name of Shimon Lakish, Legabol, that the reason why we have to know how big a sheer mill is. The sheer mill brings it down in other dinu halacha also. For example, the gabel for a gabel. Gabel is a nida. It means in those days they used to get someone to make bread for them. They used to bring flour and things to a person, and the baker will make the bread with your utensils. So if someone is kneading your dough, and his kalim became tummy, or your kalim became tummy. So he has to go, and now before he makes the dough, he has to go and table the kalim. How long that's where the mikveh is very far away. Does he still have to go? So it says, we're going to see in a second, if it's 4 million, so then if the nearest mikveh is more than 4 million away, so then he doesn't have to go. But if it's less than 4 million, he does have to go. So that's the first where we see a mill is negel lalach. Regarding a gabel, someone who's kneading bread, and his kelim became tummy. So to regarding tefillah, if there's a minyan within 4 mil walk, you have to go there. So to regarding Netilas Yadayim, all these things are brought on Shulchan Aruch, by the way. So to regarding washing your hands, if you have water, 4 million walk away, you have to go. All these things, you have to walk Abra million. So why do you have to know how big a mill is? Because it's brought down in how much different halachas regarding tabling kelim, regarding davening with the minyan, and regarding Netilas Yadayim, you have to walk 4 mil. Amr Nachman by Yitzchak, and Nachman by Yitzchak said, Evu Amr. We just said now this din in the name of Rabbi. And Nachman Yitzchak said, I heard it in the name of Evu. Evu said in the name of Rish Lakish, but he didn't say that he didn't say only 3 din. Rish Lakish said, Rabbi said 3 din, that was the din of the Indian of Abraham Midden is Negeh. We said neither davening and Netilas Yadayim. And Nachman says, I heard that there's 4 things. These 3. And one of the extra one, the 4th one is Ibud. It's regarding Ibud. Ibud means, we can learn in the next Mishnah, Ibud means to work on skin, to make it into leather. It's now because we learn in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, V'chulam, all skin. Regarding skin, the Mishnah says, any skin that you work on, or you walked in it, the time it takes to make parchment. What's this Mishnah talking about? The Mishnah talking about that you have different skin of animals that usually people eat them. For example, chicken skin, and people usually eat them, or skin of other animals. So what if I'm going to take skin of a very thin skin, and I'm going to start working on it, walking on it in order to make it into some sort of parchment? So even if I work in it a little bit, even if the time it takes to make it, the time it usually takes to make parchment, tie. Why? What do you mean the tie? It means that they can't be makabel tumas eichel, piece of skin that is usually eaten and now has a halachic status as food. What if I work and make it a parchment or make it into something else? So then it loses the status as food. When does it lose the status of food? When I stamp on it enough time, the shear that it takes, the time that it takes to work on skin. Other besides the skin of a person, human flesh, human skin. A human skin always stays tamei, even if you're going to trample on it for it to become parchment. How much is kadeva? How much does it take to make skin, to make the leather? Amar of Evo, Amar of Yanai, that you have to stamp on it, you have to walk on it, the time that it takes to walk 4 mil, which is around 15 minutes. So if you worked in it 15 minutes, so you lose the status of food, and now it goes into the status of skin. What's nafkamina? If something is if it's a makabel tuma because of tumas eichlin or not. Amr Beis Bachanina said, That which you said you have to walk in all these halachas, you have to walk 4 mil, is only in front, meaning only if the mikveh is in front of you, or the water for the Netilas Yadayim is in front of you, or the minyan is in front of you. But to walk back in another direction, which means that you're going to lose time off your trip, meaning you're not going in this direction, I have to walk in a different direction. Even a mil, he doesn't have to go back. Says, from here we learn out, he doesn't have to go back if it's exactly a mil. If you have something which is less than a mil, let's say a 10-minute walk or a 12-minute walk, so if it's a sheer mil, sorry, not 12 minutes, much less than that. If it's a sheer mil, anything less than that, you do have to walk even in a different direction, out of your direction, even behind you. But if it's in front of you, you have to walk 4 mil. And that's what the Gemara finishes, a different din and why a mil is negea, la halacha, in different din. We stop on the Mishnah over here, from Vav with Aleph. Continue tomorrow with the Mishnah. Vav and Aleph go on to Vav and Beis. Have a good night.